But why I decided to run for president. It was the summer to fall of 2015, and we got it now? Yeah, good. It was summer, fall 2015. I was supporting Senator Rand Paul. I thought Rand Paul was the best choice. He was the most exciting candidate, the closest to my beliefs. While still, I'm a libertarian by party, but I still support Republicans when I think that they're the right pick. Just like I support MASH or Massey or all of that, because parties tend to be secondary to me, as I said in my concession speech for the Libertarian nomination. But when I saw that Rand Paul looked like he was not going to make it, when I saw that Ted Cruz, who was in many ways a true conservative, was not going to make it, I thought to myself, if this happens, if Rand drops out, and if Cruz drops out, and if we have just Gary Johnson in the Libertarian Party, there will be no one to advance the political ideas that I believe in this presidential race. So at a minimum, I thought to myself, well, if I run for president, then maybe I can make Gary Johnson a better candidate, at least, even if I couldn't win. But if I could win, then I could bring these ideas to the American people in a way that they have never heard before. Bring fire and passion, and not just ideology, but the concept of libertarian principles in a manner that the American people find palatable. Because remember, we as super nerds, not very good with marketing, we tend to be so highly individualistic that maybe we lack empathy, perhaps. I made a joke that went really horrible a couple of weeks ago, so maybe I shouldn't make it again. I will. There was an article that came out in Reason magazine that said that libertarianism causes autism. And yes, that's funny, but being that we are so highly individualistic, being that we suffer a tad from empathy, you don't see many libertarians rocking to the beats of Justin Bieber, right? We're not cool, we're not attuned to we're not playing the dank memes and the live streams, and we're not connecting to the overall culture. So I thought to myself, well, here, let's make this a cultural libertarian play that is principled and ideological, that contains all of the spirit of Ron Paul and the passion and fires of American Revolution to the American people in a way that they would find palatable. And sure enough, the American people loved it, but the libertarians hated it, so I lost. But it was still a good exercise, and it was still, in many ways, it was a campaign that has pioneered many other campaigns and inspired many others to run for office, and I'm still very proud of it. Because we raised around $120,000 my first time out running for any office whatsoever, just on the power of social media alone, right? And when people would send me their phone numbers, I would call them personally to raise money. And that a lot of libertarians really eschew some of those things, but connecting to your voters now directly, I think, is the revolution. That is the way that grassroots politics and grassroots politicians with no name recognition, nobody knew who I was. Most people don't really still know who I am, other than people who are highly connected and developed and interested in these ideas. But there were a lot of lessons that I learned during the campaign, and I'm going to share with you some of my 9 favorite moments. They're not all ideological based, but some of them are just funny. So here they are. So the number 9 moment from the Libertarian Party race that I enjoyed was being the front runner for 1 month in the fall of 2015. That was fun because Gary Johnson was not in the race. Rand Paul and Ted Cruz were starting to go down. Trump was steamrolling everyone, and I was the only Libertarian Party candidate, other than maybe like 2 or 3 others that were in the race, who had no history with the libertarian movement. So for 1 month, 2 months, I got to be the front runner. And that was exciting. I'm like, I'm a front runner for president of the United States. And then here comes Gary, and then here comes John McAfee, and then it was all over. But still, it was great. And I remember filing my FEC forms, mailing bumper stickers by myself, and selling wristbands with 2 or 3 volunteers all online, and then getting a phone call from Nick Sarwark, the head of the Libertarian Party, for the first time, hearing from Nick. And he's like, Austin, hey, congratulations, and thank you for deciding to seek the Libertarian Party's nomination. I just want to let you know that you filed your FEC forms incorrectly. And I was like, dang. First thing that I did for a presidential candidate. Well, at the time, I didn't have all these fancy lawyers and employees and consulting firms and things that I work with now. I was doing it all on my own. Because I thought to myself, no one is going to do this for me. if you want to lead, you've got to lead from out front. And so I said, if I have to mail every bumper sticker, if I have to knock on every door, if I have to do everything myself, I will. Now, I know that that's not how campaigns are won, that you need a good, strong team. But the point is that if you can inspire people to join you and to work for you for free at a minimum in the beginning, then you're not going to be able to go from zero to hero. You have to lead. You have to be the person who says, I'm willing to break down the chairs afterwards. You have to say, yes, I'm running for president of the United States, but I'm going to stick around and I'm going to clean up and I'm going to be a part of making sure that this campaign is successful. Like the sign on Harry Truman's desk, the buck stops here, right? But you are a public servant, and that is the concept that every libertarian should take with them when they run for office. We're not just trying to be supreme commander, overlord of the universe. We're trying to be a public servant, and you should embody that. The next point, one of my favorite moments, I was in a debate. I was in North Carolina, and I was being a little snarky. As I started to grow up a little bit more, at the beginning of the campaign, I thought I had to be really aggressive. And Gary Johnson was the head, the CEO of a marijuana company at the time, Cannabis Sativa. And John McAfee admitted to selling a lot of drugs. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to get a jab in on these guys. So we're in the debate, and I said, I think it's quite funny that you think that 2 drug dealers will ever be president of the United States. And Gary was like, ba-dab-a-dab-a-dee-ba-dee. And John McAfee was like, Austin, you will come to my house in Tennessee. You will take 2 hits of acid with me, and it will change your life. And I thought, holy hell, I just got asked to do acid in a presidential debate. There's really nothing to learn from that, but it is funny. Hilarious. John McAfee might have killed a guy, but a cool guy. I love you, John. I hope you're not mad. He's sick right now with appendicitis, I believe, so get well, John, wherever you are. Next favorite moment. I did get to use that musical theater background, and I learned my lessons as a politician very well, because when I was in Georgia for a presidential debate, one of the questions that was being asked, and keep in mind at the time, I'm running on fumes. I mean, I'm making just enough cash from my supporters to get from city to city, right? Every time we get to a town, we got to raise money so that we can get to the next town, to the next debate, right? And I'm in Georgia, and they asked the question of all questions. I mean, I can answer any policy question you want. But when they asked this question, I was like pulling a Gary Johnson here, like, right, having an Aleppo moment. And they asked me the question, how are you going to raise enough money to fund an entire national campaign? So I went and I thought about it for a second, and I just go, I don't have much money, but boy, if I did, buy a big house where we both can live. The crowd went nuts, like, yeah! And I was like, yeah, avoided that one. Done, no problem. And the best part about it was that Gary Johnson's vice presidential candidate from the last time was there, and he was debating for him. And he came up afterwards and went up and was like, I hope you don't mind that I put down in words. And then he finished the song, and everybody laughed and clapped. And thankfully, I didn't have to answer the question, because I didn't want it. But musical theater did come in handy there. One of my next most favorite moments, a very teachable moment, something I learned a lot about libertarians in this moment. I think we all have a lot to learn from the libertarian movement, but none so much as the moment when I was asked the question if I thought that it should be legal to sell heroin to 5-year-olds. I said no, and the LP said, boo. And I looked around and I was like, I am not in the right place right now. I thought, wow, this isn't liberty in my opinion. Maybe it is, but it's not my kind of liberty. But it did sort of draw for me the stark contrast between the types of ideologies in libertarianism that can often be in opposition. And it was stemming from a debate, a topic, which is makes me a heretic, which makes me a pariah, which makes me very unpopular in libertarian circles. But hell with it. because I didn't run for president of the United States to appease libertarians. I ran for president of the United States to bring liberty to America. And the question was, of course, whether or not there are some rights that children have that are separate from the rights of adults. That is the question of the age of consent, right? At what age can a child consent to engage in dangerous behaviors, things like smoking, perhaps things like alcohol, right? I might even be willing to say that perhaps the legal drinking age is too high, right? Maybe it should be 18 years old. If you're old enough to die for your country, you ought to be able to drink a beer. You guys, you little kids, you'll be there soon, right? But don't drink and drive. But some anarchists think that it should be legal to drink and drive, right? They think that government is so evil in such a manner, that government is a worse evil than, you little boys doing hard drugs. Don't do hard drugs, kids, right? So the question was about the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle is, many people argue, the centerpiece of libertarianism. I disagree. But the non-aggression principle, or the NAP, some of you were here earlier today, I'll try not to be too redundant. The non-aggression principle means that you cannot initiate force unless force has been initiated against you, right? So it's the concept of aggression is rather undefined. Some people say it's merely the initiation of violent force. That being said, if that's the case, well, neglect, if you allow your child to starve to death, that is not an initiation of force. The anarchists will say that that is not an initiation of force, therefore that is not a crime. It may be immoral, but it's not criminal because it's not an initiation of force. Now, some will disagree. Some will say, hey, well, if you have a child, there's an implicit contract there. You can't allow your child to starve to death because when you bring a child into this world, there's an implicit contract there. And then I say, okay, well, isn't the Constitution an implicit contract? And they're like, but I didn't sign that. Well, you didn't sign a contract to bring a child into the world either. Implicit contracts exist. You as lawyers know this. I'm a musical theater major and I know this. Why don't some of my own party members? Anyways, I'm going to hell for that one. Sorry. All right, moving on. One of my next most favorite moments. You will bake the cake. You will bake the damn cake. Pardon my language, kids. Don't speak like that. Now, this wasn't my favorite moment of the debates because it was just Garrett to Gary's detriment. Because I had debated Gary on this topic a week before. We were in Oregon, and he expressed, to my flabbergasted, disapproval, that he thought that yes, Christians should be forced to bake a cake for a gay wedding. Now, I love my gay friends. I love my gay family members. Not only do I believe that you should be able to get married if you're gay, that I actually think that's a great thing. I personally endorse it from my own social perspective. I am considered what you might call a social liberal. Gary is a social liberal but why is it that I as a social liberal and Gary as a social liberal have different viewpoints on this? Well, because Gary's afraid. Gary's afraid for a very good reason. Because without historical context, the discussion about whether or not you should force someone to bake a cake quickly devolves from the question of homophobia and bigotry into the question of racism and bigotry. Because the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which is the question at hand here, deals with the question of private association, private property, civil rights, civil liberties, and whether or not one should have the right to discriminate on public property or private property. Libertarians hold private property sacred. Libertarians believe that if it's your house or your home or your place of business, that you should have the right to refuse service to anyone however you please. But that is not the law of the land in the United States. Many of you who are lawyers who may get into criminal law or may get into discrimination, have discrimination cases, these kinds, the Civil Rights Act will be placed before you. And it lists a specific criteria for when you can or you can't discriminate against someone. If you walk outside of this building and you walk off of the campus and you go into downtown Macon and you do a man on the street quiz and you ask people the question, do you think the government should make racism illegal? Probably 90% of the average man on the street will say yes. The government should make racism illegal. How do you do that? It leads one to the question of The most politically incorrect question you might be able to ask is, do racists have rights? Do they? Sure. But the problem with libertarianism is that we end up having to defend the scoundrels. You as lawyers, future lawyers here in the United States, will, especially if you're criminal lawyers, will be defending scoundrels and miscreants. You will be defending rapists and murderers. You will be defending people because even the most horrible, heinous, disgusting, evil people are still people and have rights. And the government cannot take away their rights. The government should never be allowed to discriminate. Under no circumstances whatsoever should a government be able to say, oh, well, we'll have one set of rules for African Americans and one set of rules for whites. We should never have a government that will say, we'll have one set of rules for gays and we'll have one set of rules for straights. That is discrimination that is paid for by taxpayer dollars. Now, people discriminate in all sorts of ways, and I despise discrimination. As someone who considers myself very socially liberal, I hate it when if somebody would say something wrong or negative or nasty about my gay friends or my black friends, or my Christian friends. And I'm not a Christian. But I love my Christian friends. I love my Christian family, the church family that I was raised in. Now, to some people, defending gays is distasteful. To some people, to my friends, my socially liberal friends, my secular friends, they hate Christians. And I find myself being a hated figure, controversial, and very much disliked by people because I defend the rights of all individuals if they choose to discriminate. And that is a dangerous position to be in. Now, if you're a Christian, you will be forced to bake the cake. The Christian couple that I'm discussing, they were forced to bake a wedding cake for a gay wedding, and they refused. They were issued a fine for $135,000, forcing them to close down. They appealed, and they lost their appeal. They will be required to pay $135,000. It's a tough question. Because now we're talking about religion. And then when you start talking about religion, people say, well, religion's different. You're not born Christian. You're not born Muslim. You're not born Jew. Religion's a choice. Being a race is different. You can't choose your race. They have a point. That's true. But when the government gets in and starts telling people what they can or can't do in terms of discrimination, then we have unintended consequences. And we get, from the civil rights era, which the Civil Rights Bill, in my opinion, absolutely had to pass. Civil rights, the time had come. But now we see the unintended consequences, not of getting rid of Jim Crow, not of getting rid of forced segregation, which we absolutely needed to do, and the Civil Rights Act did and was right to do so. But when we said, now at the lunch counters, we're forcing them to integrate on private property, or we declare businesses to be public property, now the unintended consequences are that Christians find themselves the victims. And I will defend the rights of Christians. The only time that defending liberty matters is when you defend the liberty of someone who disagrees with you. It's perfectly fine and easy and no problem to defend the rights of people who agree with you. You're not brave, though. As a matter of fact, I think you guys Harry Potter fans? Any of you Harry Potter fans? Well, if you remember, there was a really famous quote by Dumbledore, and one of Dumbledore's best quotes, I thought, was, "You're not brave for standing up to your enemies. You're brave for standing up to your friends." Sometimes your friends are wrong. Sometimes you got to stand up to your friends when they're wrong, and that's real courage. And sometimes we as libertarians are wrong. Sometimes we're wrong in how we couch arguments. The Civil Rights Act did need to be passed. But when it came to the public-private provision, now we are seeing that American society is starting to roll that back. We have religious freedom laws. There was a federal law that was passed in 1993 by Bill Clinton and Chuck Schumer, and that dealt with a federal question. There are 24 states that have religious freedom laws. that are rolling back some of these provisions so that you can have a religious exemption, which we should have. But private property is private property. Some truths are politically incorrect. And it's dangerous to defend liberty because you end up defending scoundrels. Anyways, sorry, Gary. Number 4. Another one of my favorite moments from the Libertarian primate was winning over conservatives in my interview with Glenn Beck on the issue of libertarian immigration. This is a dangerous subject too, especially in the age of Donald Trump. Build that wall. MAGA. Make America great again. Stop those Mexicans and those evil Canadians, the snow Mexicans. Right? We got to stop them because what are they doing? They're taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs, right? All the edgy 15-year-olds who are watching this right now are like, cringe, Austin, cringe. They want me to grow up. They don't want me to have any fun. They want me to be more serious. Whatever. But I was able to convince conservatives on the immigration issue because we're talking about open borders. We're talking about a welfare state. Terrify conservatives. Terrify, right? You can't have open borders in a welfare state, Milton Friedman said. And he's right. But conservatives, they cut off the second part of that argument. Because the second part of the argument said, if you have open borders in a welfare state like we have now, well, then illegal immigration would be technically superior to legal immigration because if they come here illegally, they don't qualify for the benefits. Now, that's changed a bit since the 1980s with Milton Friedman, and now there are some benefits on a state level, not a federal level, for immigrants, right? Unless you're a refugee. But we always had refugee laws, and being parties to the Geneva Convention, we commit to taking in a certain amount of refugees every year. I believe it's 20,000. But because I was able to frame this in a question of private property and of economic liberty, because you know what the government does? They don't just stop you at the border. You know what they do is they crack down on you. Anybody here own a business? I do. You can't hire someone unless they conform to immigration laws. So you are the enforcer of the law now. You are the Gestapo. It's your duty to inform and pay your taxes. But the way that the problem I think with the argument on immigration is they say, well, you can't have open borders in a welfare state. Well, the welfare is the problem. Because during the Ellis Island years, the great Ellis Island years in the United States, one of the most prosperous moments in American history, pre-Great Depression, when the Petersens came from Denmark, ja, super, S-E-N, F-Y-I. They came through Ellis Island. But here's the caveat. In those years, you had a stringent security check. You had a stringent disease check. And if you did not pass, you went home. But once you passed, it was done. There was no decade-long conversion process for you to become an American citizen. The naturalization process is constitutional. But the Founding Fathers didn't write immigration into the original Constitution. Now, do you know that in the Declaration of Independence, one of the primary reasons that compelled the Americans to separate from Great Britain was not just taxes on tea, not just the fact that we could be drafted into King George's wars, but it was because we weren't allowed to settle lands west of the Appalachians. What do you think the colonists would have done if King George tried to build a wall and keep us out of the French territories? We would have dug a tunnel. We would have Oregon trailed south of that thing and then come back around until we got to California. Americans weren't a big fan of King George's immigration plan at the time. He wanted to build a wall, but we weren't going to let him. So we fought a revolution, and we fought for our right of freedom of movement. Now, I'm not suggesting that we have anarchy and open borders. I think we need a reasonable path to immigration. But we are incentivizing crime. We are incentivizing illegal immigration right now. Because anyone who is fleeing poverty or oppression or big government and whether it be Cuba or Mexico or Canadian healthcare, they'll want to bring a better life for their family in the United States. We want to be the nation that people want to immigrate to. For a short time, we had more immigration from Mexicans back across the border because our economy was so bad. That's a bad sign. Now, a lot of conservatives say, well, Austin, I agree with you on a lot of things, but I don't agree with you on immigration. And then they'll say, in another breath, they'll say, well, I love Ronald Reagan. I'm like, oh, did you like his amnesty? Ugh. Ugh. You're not confirming my biases. You're not telling me what I want to hear. Ronald Reagan and George Bush fought harder to be the more open borders candidate. The Republican Party of today is not the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan. It is no longer a conservative party. Sorry. It's a populist party now. Might makes right. What people believe, if the majority of people believe it, that makes it true. Guys, you know that. Just because a lot of people believe something, that doesn't make it true, right? Right? If the majority of people believe that we're all space aliens, that wouldn't make it true. We're not space aliens, right, guys? Maybe. There may be some reptilians among us. Ask Alex Jones. Although, if you guys know Alex Jones, it turns out he's not real because his lawyers, he's in a custody battle. His lawyers are arguing that it's all a performance art, but his ex-wife is saying, no, it's the real deal. He's really crazy. So now all of his fans have to say, yeah, his ex-wife is right. He's the real deal. He's really crazy. They can't support Alex because Alex is saying he's not real. It's a mess. Don't Google Alex Jones, guys. You'll be fine. Okay. But I won over conservatives on the immigration issue because I discussed about they as business owners are the enforcers. The people should not be saddled with enforcing the law. That is the government's job. If the government cannot enforce the law, then the law is unjust, the law is wrong, the law must be rewritten, it must be changed, or it must be abolished. If the government cannot enforce its own laws, it's not the job of the people to enforce the law. Next is, I love this one. And if you didn't watch the debates, I got criticized quite frequently by pundits, and then the pundits picked it up, and then the libertarians who were opposing me picked it up. They're like, I don't like that Austin Petersen because he speaks in a series of bumper sticker phrases. That's horrible. That idiot, he took all of our brilliant ideas and white papers and years and research, and he boiled them down into 30-second sound bites that he nailed in those debates. What an idiot. He said that he believes in a world where gay married couples can protect their marijuana fields with fully automatic machine guns. What a jerk. The only fair is laissez-faire. A fine is a tax for doing wrong. A tax is a fine for doing well. Oh, Austin doesn't have any elected experience. Oh, Donald Trump just won. But he's a business executive. So was I. But he was a billionaire. Oh, so only billionaires can be president. Confirmation bias abounds. Personality cults. The libertarian movement collapses inward like a poorly baked cake. And very funny, too, because a friend of mine sent me an article or an excerpt from a book, and she's talking about the powers of public persuasion. And how funny, isn't it? He says, if you want to really convince a crowd these days, you've got to be able to take an argument and you've got to be able to boil it down. You've got to be able to convince people in 30 seconds or less. Call this the bumper sticker phrase of the argument. And I'm just like, well, shucks. We have a problem in communicating our ideas because being the super nerds that we are, the mega uber hyper intellectual, possibly autistic super nerds, we think what we want is what the American people want. We don't know what the American people want because we live in a bubble. We frequently listen to ponderous lectures on Austrian free market banking and the gold standard and Scottish free banking and, oh gosh, the Constitution. And what's your favorite right? Oh, jolly old chap. Yes. Damn the redcoats and all that. But that's not what the American people are doing. That's not what the American people are doing. Many of them get their political news a week before the vote, if that. Maybe they go and they research the candidate. You ever research the candidate like right before you go in to vote? Come on, you've done it. Yeah, come on. You know every single person on your ballot, right? What do? Just vote straight ticket Republican? Whatever, dude. But the bumper sticker phrase is the bomb. That's where we should be dropping bombs. Right there, in the debates. Not in Syria. Which reminds me, I preferred the way that Gary Johnson bombed Aleppo to the way Donald just did. We'll get to that in a moment. But you got to take those negatives sometimes and turn them into a positive. And we've got to get better at communicating our ideas in a soundbite world. It's Donald Trump's world. I'm just living in it. Some things you can change, some things you cannot. Some things you, in matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock. We got to be cool. We got to get cool. We're not cool. Next favorite moment, taking second place in the Colorado debate, even though I wasn't invited. And I got to watch Gary Johnson pull a San Dimas High School football rules. Okay, so this is the story. Basically, Gary flubbed in the debate. They asked him what a right was. He didn't know what the right was. I got up and answered it for him. He was mad, whatever. They didn't invite me to the debate, but I went anyway. And so at the very end, we're giving like our closing statements, and Gary is kind of like fumbling through it. And he's not doing so hot and stuff like that. So have you ever seen the movie Encino Man, or what's Adam Sandler movie, Billy Madison? You know how Billy at the very end is like bombing his speech, right? And like everybody sitting in the audience are not saying anything, and then he's like, San Dimas High School football rules! And then everybody's like, yeah! Gary totally pulled one of those. So we're in the debate, and then he's giving his closing statements, and he's like, you rock Colorado! Yeah, you legalized weed! Get on your feet! Yeah! And everybody's like clapping, and I'm like, he just pulled the San Dimas High School football rules! That's cheating! Like, I was like trying to give like this impassioned defense of liberty and like how I would like go out and fight the statists and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I should have just pulled the San Dimas, but sometimes it works. And the number one favorite moment, probably because it was totally humiliating, and because I deserved in some ways to lose for some of the tactical mistakes that I had made, and because the Libertarians did not want my brand of libertarianism, but I gave Governor Johnson a gift of a gun. It was a flintlock pistol, replica of a firearm that was a possession of mine, and he threw it in the trash. And I didn't know that that was true until the day after I sort of contained my anger, and like my supporters who saw it, who came up and brought it to me, were like, hey, can we go kick his butt? And I'm like, no, wait. But it was probably my favorite moment, because it was, for me, it was the moment that I believed that I could have been president. And the reason why is because faced with the ultimate power of 100 angry supporters ready to go to war, I chose peace. Though I had every intention, though I believe maybe my nap wasn't violated, but it was close enough. But I had every reason to go to war. It was over my ego. And so I wasn't going to go to war or get my people in trouble or put them in harm's way over my own ego. And someone wrote later that they didn't know if they should support me because they didn't know if I could take a big blow or what it would do to me or how I would react. And then they said later that after that moment, they said they were sorry they doubted me. And when I thought about it, I realized that I was capable. I was capable of self-control. And that's what we need in our elected leaders. That's what we need. All right, let's talk. Thanks, guys. Thank you.